Well, what we're going to talk about today is what we can do right now, some ideas for that, and then open it up to questions. But Jim, I wanted to start with a video. I thought this was really interesting because one thing we haven't talked about is how we help parents adjust to this reality. And so what I have is a video of you of how they're for you. Now this is a rural area of Ohio, but this is how the parents are doing recess. So I thought it was fascinating. So let's roll the video. What they did is they put water and dirt and made a mudslide, and so the kids are running down the mudslide, and they are having recess. Now it's quite a way to clean up afterwards, I'm sure. But the one point in time, here goes another kid, and they're just having a ball. So that's recess in Ohio. All right, on the farm, homeschooling.
All right, I'm taking notes. I'm getting some great ideas. This has been a really valuable webinar so far.
All righty. So I wanted Jim to talk a little bit about what we can do right now and what he's doing. And then I want to share a paper with you about some suggestions for online learning, and then open it up to questions. But one of the reasons we did this is that right now, schools are one of the myths out there about schools is that schools are for learning, and I think that's their stated purpose. But the reality for kids in poverty, it's a safety net and it's a distribution system for resources. If you think about all the vaccinations run through schools, all the child molester protections run through schools, all the child counting runs through schools. You start looking at all the ways the schools serve as an entry point for services. It all comes through the schools. That safety net is gone, and the resources that go with it, food, medical care, etc. So one of the big sources now to figure out if kids are okay is online. So we're going to talk about some tools you might use. But I wanted to talk about the adults too. And Jim, do you want to share with them what you're doing in Iowa and tell them your role, what you're doing for teachers in Iowa?
So I'm a semi-retired school psychologist. By semi-retired, I mean I used to be a school psychologist for real, and then they gave me that early retirement incentive that some of y'all are just praying for comes soon. I got that. And but I wasn't quite ready to quit, and so I am now an independent contractor with the school district that I served for, well, at the time it was more than 30 years. So I'm in my 35th year of serving the same district, which is a little bit unusual in our area. We usually get reassigned, but I had a district nobody else wanted to go to. The advantage of that, of course, is that I've got long-term relationships. All of the kids that I worked with are now the parents of the kids that I'm working with. And so I am now in that community, I am Mr. Ott. Like, that's weird for me. I've never thought of myself as Mr. anything, but even the parents know me as Mr. Ott. And so because of those relationships, I have this long-term role in the community that's allowed me to have a voice in ways that maybe other people haven't. So what I started doing when the quarantine began was I started doing daily videos, which were basically mental health tips. We call it the Bellevue Schools COVID Quarantine Coping Tips with Mr. Ott. Did you want to write that down? I can put that in the chat box. That's a bad title. We're not going to use that title. But every day I'm just doing either a short video with a concept or a tip or a suggestion or something you can talk to your kids about. And the whole goal really, I have to say, when I first started it, I wanted to do it for the kids. What I realized is I was doing it for the parents, because the parents are experiencing so much stress about doing it right. And they're very afraid right now that their kids are going to be the ones that are left behind. They're really experiencing a lot of anxiety. And so what I've been trying to do is help them frame their own thoughts around the idea that they have an opportunity during this time to do things that they wouldn't get to do if there was real school, in terms of building social, emotional, mental health, positive mental health skills in their kids that will be a foundation so that when they re-enter school, they'll be ready for that. Doing it in such a way that is, emphasizing that the teachers will be ready when your kids come back, and they will take them as they are. In the meantime, this is what your kids really need, because obviously, well, we know this. First of all, kids are pretty resilient, right? They'll roll with the punches at a level that sometimes adults worry about what's happening to kids more than the kids themselves. But the kids will pick up on the parents' anxiety. And so helping the parents to just feel more at ease with what's going on, and to be that daily voice of somebody that they know. And I mean, this, like, I don't want to be tooting my own horn, but you put in 35 years, you get a reputation. Okay. At this point, I still have a reputation where most of the people in the community think that I am for them, not against them. And so just being that friendly face, so to speak, I think has been really useful. And so I'm getting good feedback from the teachers, good feedback from parents, and good feedback from my mom, who also watches the videos. She's not teaching anymore. She never taught, but it's just been a nice thing to keep my voice in the conversation. But for me personally, because I am now totally in the psychology part of school psychology, I'm not, as a school psychologist, I was involved in a lot of special education, a lot of IEPs and those kinds of things. I don't do that work anymore. And for me personally, to stay connected with the community, this has been a valuable thing for me to do as well. So what I'll do is I'll put in the chat room a link to the playlist. It's on YouTube. It's public. Anybody can watch them. My encouragement is, yeah, go ahead and watch a couple, especially the first couple, because they're the overview. One of the things I've been doing recently that's been fun is I've been interviewing families and students and teachers, and Dr. Ruby Payne was one of my interview people. That was pretty cool. And I've been interviewing them about not only about what they're experiencing professionally, but also personally. And I'm finding that those interviews are getting more views than just me talking. So having that relationship, then bringing other people into the conversation, is, I think, just helping people know that they're not alone, that they're not the only ones.
You used an organizer. You want to talk about the organizer you're using?
Yeah, so I developed an organizer that, is really a very similar kind of thing. If you just take the 8 resources, it's a very similar kind of a model, but more towards a mental health thing. And it's something I had developed in Bellevue with another guy I was working with. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So we call it the INSPIRE model, and IN is small, and then the SPIRE are capital. And I'm using that as a framework. So each of those letters stands for one of the pillars that we have to work on, or that we can work on, that you work on whether you know you're doing it or not, either for it or against it, and then using those to work on how can we get stronger in these areas. So those 5 letters, the S stands for spiritual, the P for physical, the I for intellectual, the R for relational, which, by the way, spell check says that's not a word, and the E is for emotional. And so introducing that, then when I'm doing my things, I will refer to that and say, okay, this is something that is in the spiritual and relational, and it really addresses those things. Or here's some physical hints. Here's a video of what you can do physically. You can make a mudslide. Some of our recesses actually look like that at the school I work at, but I'm using that as a model so that and then I've made like just a couple of grids that, you can fill these in, or you can play like Inspire Bingo. What did I do in these 5 columns during a day or during a week? It's a way to give some concrete framework that people can fill in with their own individual ideas that make sense in their own families. So, a physical thing, one thing I emphasize a lot when I'm talking is drink a lot of water. One thing that, that I talked to the kids about before, I was really doing a lot of work with some 6th graders in particular, but this concept, physically, eat food, not junk. Make sure you're eating food, not junk. And defining food as something that was alive recently. Like, potato chips were not alive recently. That was not alive, but broccoli was alive recently. Okay, that kind of stuff. And I'm doing that in each of those columns so that each day in a 5 or 10 minute video, we can address one of the areas, or sometimes they overlap. And it gives parents something that they can then write down at home. They can make a little poster, put it on their fridge if they want to. It's just another framework that, everybody's out there scrambling, trying to come up with these kinds of things. This is just the one that we're using. I'll type that into the chat as well.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody have questions for Jim? Or comments in the chat box?
Your phones are open if you want to ask that question, or yes, please chat it in.
Okay. Well, I want to piggyback on one thing Jim said, and he's labeled as Lynn Jackson, but actually that's Jim Ott.
That's right. I am Lynn Jackson.
He wants to change identities right now. But anyway, and I'm labeled as Ruth Wyrick, but I'm actually Ruby Payne. So we have some labeling issues to work on here. But I want to say one thing about parents and then give a suggestion for some tips for online learning. And we, with this video or this online live chat, there's an article you can download to share with staff if you wish, that I wrote about online schooling function versus structure. But one of the things I want to say is about parents. I got a text from one of my relatives who said, Ruby, I don't know what to do. She's a parent. She said, I'm homeschool. I've got now at home 2 kindergartners, a 3rd grader, a 4th grader, and a 5th grader. And she said, the way I'm trying to get them through their lessons, it's just not working. And she said, I'm not an educator. Do you have any ideas for me? So I said, yes, I do. I said, first of all, she said, we're trying to do it all between 9 and 12 in the morning, and we don't even have enough internet bandwidth for everybody to be on the device at the same time. And she said, I can't help them all at the same time, and it's driving me nuts. I said, look, first of all, what you need to do is you need to put, for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grader, you need to give them a level of personal responsibility. So the way you do that is you take a piece of paper and you put 6 boxes on it or 9 boxes. You can do it either way. And in each box, like 1 box is for reading, 1 box is for math, 1 box is for science and social studies, 1 box is for physical activity, 1 box is for a chore that you are responsible for around the house. 1 box is for social interaction. And I said, you can identify what other boxes you want there. Maybe 1 is cleaning their room or keeping it neat, whatever. I said, but then what you say to them is that you're responsible for getting each box done. And the math and the reading box are at least 45 minutes of your day. The rest you have flexible time about. And I said, then what you need to do as the parent is structure the time you're going to meet with them. So maybe from 8 to 9, you meet with the kindergartners. Then from 9 to 10, you meet with the 3-year-olds. Then from 3rd graders. Then from 10 to 11, it's the 4th and 5th graders. I said, you can do them together. But I said, you have to figure out for your time. And then I said, they keep track of their boxes and what they got done. They check them off. And then at the end of the day, you keep track. And I said, you can give a dime or a quarter or whatever for each box they check off every day. And I said, you tell them that's their work, just like you have work. And it gives a way then for you to keep them motivated, but you to get the work done as well. And she wrote back about 4 days later and said, Ruby, it's just working like a charm. Okay. But the thing is, if you've never been a teacher and you have no idea how to organize it so that stuff gets done, it is a very simple way, a tool you can give to them that will help them with their own anxiety. It's like Jim said, they have a lot of anxiety. Okay. And then I wrote this paper that you can download, and I just want to give a couple tips here for online schooling for educators. And I want to say part of the issue here is this. As educators are seeing into homes via online, they're seeing things that they find really upsetting, okay? And so the question is, what do you pay attention to and what do you do? One of the things we know is that domestic violence is up by 35% across the United States. And another thing we know is that the referrals, 80% of referrals for child abuse come through educators. Well, how do you know when you're looking online and you see in homes what you should pay attention to? And there's a lot of research out there about the difference between structure and function. Structure is where there's one adult, two adults, step family, blended family, whatever in the house. Structure of the household is not nearly as important as function. And function is the extent to which a child can get their needs met. Material necessities, learning, respect, relationships, to what extent is that happening? So when you're online, one of the things I recommend is that you not pay attention to whether the couch has a hole in it or not, or whether there's a lot of people there, or whether it's not very clean. What you really want to look at is the child functioning okay in that environment. And I had some suggestions in this on the first page and the second page for your consideration and comment. But one of the things I recommend is that you watch their eyes. If their eyes can't look at you in the screen, and if their eyes are always down, that is an indicator that they're depressed, okay? So when you have a conversation, they may be depressed. See, when eyes are up, by the way, for all you who are listening, when eyes are up and looking at the ceiling, your brain literally neurologically cannot access feelings. So one of the fastest ways to calm down an upset child, and this is something you can share with your parents, is to make them look at the ceiling. And we ask them to draw stuff on the ceiling, or you put pictures on the ceiling, puppies, dogs, whatever. But the bottom line, it calms them down. But when your eyes are down, neurologically, the brain is accessing feelings. So if you have someone whose eyes are down all the time, that's an indicator. Then you look for things like, one thing I'd recommend is that teachers have a page of emojis that they share with kids. And one of the ways they can break the ice is to say to them, which of these emojis do you most feel like today? So it's another way to begin to see what they're doing for their feelings. And then there's a whole bunch of research around invitational language. Invitational language is ways to get information that it's non-direct, but it invites a response. So I wrote some questions that you can ask that are kind of non-invasive. They're invitational, but it would help you understand a little bit about how the child's needs are getting met. And so one of the questions is, for example, I would not ask a child if you're hungry, because a lot of them are going to say no, unless they're young. I would say, hey, a lot of people are having, when they go to the grocery store, they have to wait in a line and they're having trouble getting food. I'd say, I'd ask them, how's your household getting food? And a lot of times they'll say, well, we're not. So that gives you information there about where you might offer supports. About sleep, if they're not getting enough sleep, it's really related to emotional and mental health because of mitochondria. What happens when you sleep? Your brain cells shrink by 60%, opens the fluid passageways in the brain, and allows it to clean out the toxins, etc. If you don't sleep enough, that doesn't get cleaned out, and the research is it leads to depression. So one of the things is you can say to them, hey, are you a morning person? Do you like to sleep in, or do you like to stay up? You know, how are you doing that? And are you getting a lot of sleep? And you can find out if they're getting sleep. You're looking at function, okay? What's your favorite food? Another one is, Where do you like to sleep? Where's your favorite place to sleep? You're just trying to find out if there's the child's function is there. And so there are little tools you can use to look at, as opposed to what the physical space looks like. You really want to know how is the child and how are they functioning. So there's several suggestions in there. But now I'd like to open up the chat box for people to talk about what they're doing right now, or questions they have, or you have a question, Jim. What response are you getting from parents with your YouTube, and what are you doing for the teachers and administrators?
So as far as parents, the feedback I've gotten from parents, and I'm not like going out and calling them all and checking on them, but the feedback I've gotten has been they appreciate something that they can look at or listen to that's giving them some sense of connection. I'm not even sure that the ideas are as important as the fact that somebody is speaking to them on a daily basis that they can go to. And, you know, I don't think, well, I know just by the number of views that not every parent is watching every video, obviously. That's just not going to happen. But for the parents that are, I do think, like, one of the things I was going to say is, yeah, go check out these videos, steal them, use them. I don't care. But the reality is, steal them and do one yourself so that it's a familiar face, not mine. Because ain't nobody going to care who I am. But in your own community, a familiar face, and maybe there is somebody that's more familiar that would be willing to do some of this stuff, work with content, because I think the familiar face really is helpful right now. There's a bazillion things for people to watch on YouTube. We know that kids do it all the time. And there's people that can speak way better than me, and that certainly look a lot better than me, especially with my new haircut, which is no haircut. So like I'm not going to be as good as what's available online, but I'm a lot more familiar than what's available online. And I think that's been probably the most significant thing, is that they just appreciate that someone that they know is speaking to them. So that would probably be the primary thing I'm getting from feedback from parents. With teachers and administration, in terms of how the school is functioning, we're having, depending on the group, weekly, bi-weekly meetings, kind of like what other people are doing. I've interviewed a couple of teachers as a part of the series to engage them and let the parents and the kids hear from teachers. And I think this has been useful. And those interviews have gotten quite a few views, where the teachers are saying, okay, here's what I'm trying to do to stay connected with my kids, but I live at a home too. And I'm having stress, and I'm struggling with some of these same things that you guys are struggling with. And here's what we're doing. So with each interview, then I'll go through those 5 letters, and I'll just say, okay, here's what we're going to do. What are you guys doing at your house spiritually, physically, intellectually? And just as a little disclaimer on the spiritual, just because it's a public school, I always emphasize that spiritual, yes, it's about faith, it's about God, but it's also the big picture. How are you making sense out of this? How are you coming to terms with it in a bigger meaning and purpose way? Because I've interviewed a number of people who didn't really talk about the spiritual from a faith perspective at all, but much more how they're understanding it so that they can have the long-term view to get through it. So with teachers and staff, I'm basically serving as a resource. So I've had a number of staff who contact me and say, I had a contact with such and such a kid. Do you have some ideas about how maybe I can speak to them? I'm just serving as a resource directly to them. The teachers are having much more contact directly with students than I am. I've reached out to a couple students, but I'm still old school. Like, it's really weird for this old guy to be contacting, 16-year-old girls on Snapchat. Like, that's weird, okay? Like, I don't do that kind of stuff. And so I've sent some emails. There are a couple kids that I did have with parent permission, but I mean, I had contact with them via text. I've had a little bit of that, but I'm really trying to support the teachers because they're the ones that are having the regular contact. Is that an answer? Is that helpful?
I'm going to invite Carla Miller with the South Dakota Parent Connection to share what they are working on. Carla. Hi, everybody.
Okay, here's another question, Jim. Our cable provider has given our school system a channel that our district is using to stream. Social workers have done some videos, and our local channels have featured instruction on their daily morning show. Penny, I would have a question for you. Have videos been made directed to parents?
Our videos, I guess they've sort of been a little bit for everybody. I know that when I did my feature, I sort of went over how to handle the new normal, how to handle homeschooling or quarantine schooling, really, expectations you should set for yourself, expectations you should set for your kids. Just sort of, it was a little more global. I think the channel as a whole is going to do a little bit of everything. It's going to have some parent content directed toward the parents. I think it's going to have some content directed towards the kids. I think we're kind of like everybody else. We're trying to figure out where the needs are. I think as we get more feedback from parents, you know, I think we're going to try to tailor the content to meet that. I know that the local morning shows, that was sort of like school lessons that were featured during the morning show time. And they focused on different age groups. So I think like everybody else, we're trying to get all the avenues. Our district serves about 38,000 students. So we have, I mean, we're not certainly the biggest district, but we're pretty large. And so trying to get the information out to everybody is a challenge.
And Penny, just out of curiosity, what percentage of your students do you think you can account for?
You know, I don't know that that number's been shared with me. I know that one of the roles that we've been tasked with is that's basically what a lot of what the social workers are doing is making sure these kids are making some kind of contact. You know, it's hard for us now too, because within the last few weeks, the board made a decision that whatever schooling has been going to be done in our fourth quarter, our school year ends May 15th, is not going to count against a student. So, but that's also been perceived at, therefore, I don't have to do the work. So if I'm satisfied with my third quarter grade, I don't have to do the work in the fourth quarter. So now we're seeing where we were making contacts with parents and students, and now some of that's dropped off. So, you know, as far as percentages, it's hard to say because I don't have that information, but I know that it's definitely seen, I guess for what are we on now, our third or fourth week of this, I feel like in the last week and a half, I feel like all of a sudden, I know we're getting a lot more like we heard from kids and now we haven't heard from them anymore. We're concerned calls.
Well, I think one of the big, because next week we're going to talk about what we have to do to start back up. I have some ideas about that. And if you look at what they're doing in Denmark right now to start up schools, and there's some pictures of that online. But the bottom line is starting, and I have some ideas that I'd like to throw out next time about how to restart high school, because secondary schools, because if you can't have more than 50 kids in one space at a time, then that really impacts passing periods, etc. But part of the issue is that I talked to one high school teacher in Arizona. Now, she's on a Native American Indian reservation, but she had 150 high school kids, and she only knows where 6 of them are. So part of the issue that people are going to have when school does, quote unquote, start back is just finding kids. And one of the things I'm recommending right now is that in this interim period, that schools start trying to find kids. In other words, where are the students and can we even find them? Did they move? Where are they? Because you've also seen this economic collapse. And one of the things I think is that people will move in with other people and people will move to other locales. And it will be hard to know where everybody is. And so trying to keep track of it is going to be an interesting issue. So that's why I was asking about that. We we have a couple more minutes here. Other questions or comments or feedback? About what people are doing right now? V, you haven't said anything.
You need to unmute.
Okay, yes. Um, I was just curious. I'm a music teacher in my district, not a psychologist, social worker, or anything. So I was just really just tuning in to hear what's being said about learning at home. So
It
I'm
would
just,
make you, yeah. Have you been able to keep in touch with some of your students?
yes. Well, in our district, we're required to set up a Google Classroom. And so I've had some students respond to me that way, just ask how I'm doing. And we are also required to make a weekly video greeting the kids, asking how they're doing, telling them that we miss them and so on. So, and I've had some students respond to that. So that's nice.
Right. I saw yesterday there was a national survey that only across the United States, only 50% of kids are actually doing their schoolwork or attending classes.
That is true for me. I had probably less than 50% that responded to my Google Classroom, and of that 50%, only 50% of those are actually doing the assignment.
Hmm.
Right. In that survey, only 26% of kids in Michigan are doing their assignments or participating. Yeah. And the other thing is everybody knows is that if you're in poverty, across the United States, 30 to 40% of households in poverty do not have internet. So it makes it even more difficult. Yeah. One last thing I told Nerida when we were starting here, Nerida, that I want to leave this with a school district in Oklahoma, what they're doing. They're now a rural area, okay? But I was telling Nerida that they are driving their school buses around every Friday, and the bus drivers are honking at every house where they usually had a kid get on, and they are trying to keep up with them that way. Now, it would be harder at secondary because kids tend to drive, but it is a way to keep track of them and know where they are right now. But if there are no other questions, next time what we'd like to talk about is, and get in feedback on, is what we think the next configuration is going to look like. And I'd like to show you pictures from Denmark, what they're doing in Denmark. They opened up their elementary schools, and not their secondary, but they opened up elementary. And some pictures of how they're doing social distancing and dealing with all of that. Then I have an idea for secondary. I think secondary will be more problematic, but I think there's a way to do it. So I want to thank everybody who came on today, and it was so much fun, and we're thinking of everyone and hope you're doing well. And we have online courses. One I'd recommend is emotional poverty. One of the things we're recommending to schools when they start back is that their teachers be ready for their own emotional issues and the emotional issues that they're getting in their kids. What's happening right now is we're trying to treat emotional issues as discipline issues. It's actually not working. And so what this book does is give you a lot of vocabulary for what's happening and strategies. Like, here's how you handle it when a kid gets upset. They're quick, like making them look at the ceiling. There's just lots of things like that. So if you go on our website, which is in front of you, we're offering these courses digitally, and we've reduced the price. So one of the things that are available to people right now. So how we get our staff ready to come back will be huge. It's going to be huge. So anyway, thank everybody for all you do for kids, and thank you, Jim Ott, for sharing. And
It was great, and I really appreciated the ideas and interaction. It was really good. If I can do anything for anybody, if you go to those videos, there's an email in the notes, and you can just contact me through my school email. And please let me know if I can be of any service at all. We're all in this together. That's what we're saying. And we got to help each other.
All righty. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.